we talked about Kishevet Lashon Hamshach.
In any case, the 12 tribes, they are what bring down the infinite revelation that the patriarchs were able to capture through their self-nullification. They bring it down into the three lower worlds, meaning they make it into something that's useful in our reality. And our reality, as we said, is not that everything is one. We see causality. We see that this causes that, and so on. Shtalshus.
Why could the Avos do that? Why did they need the Shvatim to do that?
Because these are all defined as stages in the infinite revealing itself. So the Avos were the first stage, and this is the second stage. So you have 1 and 3 and 12, like we said yesterday. Ki shevet u lashon hamshecha, because shevet literally means a tribe. In Hebrew, literally means drawing something. Kmo kochava de shavit, the comet. Okay? Shevet is like a comet star, is like you would say it, if you would translate it literally. But it means that it leaves a tail. And there's a drawing out of it. That's what you see. But there's also another meaning to shevet, which is in the Torah itself. In Lashon shevet ve'anaf min ha'ilan gadol, that a shevet means a branch. So basically, branches coming out of the tree trunk, they're like a drawing out of the tree into a bigger area. Shehem b'bchinat merkava le'alma de'idgalia. They become also a chariot, he says, but a chariot to the revealed world. And again, the revealed world is our regular reality. Meaning, again, it's the same reality, but the way that regular consciousness perceives the reality. B'bchinat hayam omed al yudbet bakar. And this is what it means when Shlomo HaMelech, when he built the Beis HaMikdash, so he also put a big pool of water. Right. It's called the Yam, in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay. It was 30 cubits in circumference and 10 cubits in diameter. And so there's a lot of discussion about how you learn pi from that, but that's one of the explanations. And it was full of water, and it was standing, this big pool, it was made out of copper. It was standing on 12 statues of oxen.
Where was it?
It was in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash.
And what was it for?
It was for water. You're in the middle of a desert. You need water.
I've never heard of it. Normally we're talking into the second Beis HaMikdash.
Of course it is. Well, you don't have to have it, but yeah, you could have it. So these 12 oxen in B'chinat 12 Shvatim keneged arba chayot hamerkava pnei adam. And the way these oxen were arranged under this pool of copper was that there were 3 in each direction. So you had 3 facing north and 3 facing east and west and south. And so that was to represent the 4 camps of the angels above. And these are the chariots, right? The chariot had 4 angels called chayot, and one had the face of a man, and the other one had the face of a lion, and the face of an ox, and the face of an eagle. And they all had all the faces, so we say altogether there were actually 256 faces. But they were divided into 4 main categories. So those are also called the chariot, but this is a smaller chariot, usually. And each side of the chariot had 3 oxen, and each one was in this way made up of, it consisted of the effect of each of the 3 patriarchs. So, and that's also how they camped around the tabernacle, right? There were 3 tribes in each camp, and 3 tribes to the north. That was Dan and his tribes, 2 tribes. And to the east was Judah, and to the south was Reuven, and to the west was Joseph. Joseph's 2 tribes, Ephraim and Menashe and Binyamin. So they were all they were all divided into three because each of them needed to have a drawing down from the three patriarchs. So they had the three patriarchs represented in each one of these four camps. That's how you get 12 tribes. ומשם נמשך השפעת והמשכת גילוי אלוקות יתברך בכלל הנפשות של ישראל, שבחינת ומדרגת השבטים יכולים כל ישראל לשאת בנפשם. And then the entire Jewish people were called by their tribes, because the tribes were the second stage of bringing the revelation of the divine into the people. So you had from the infinite to the three patriarchs to the 12 tribes, and then all the rest of the Jewish souls could receive the revelation of divine love and divine fear and divine mercy that were in the patriarchs.
How come now nobody knows which shit it is?
Because now we're mixed up from them all.
Except for the Kohanim.
Kohanim are not a tribe.
Hmm?
They're not a tribe.
Levi.
וזהו שאמר הנביא על הגלות ונתקם בתיקון חצות, and this is why the prophet Isaiah says about exile, למה תתנו השם מדרכך, תקשיח ליבנו מיראתך, שוב למען עבדיך שבטי נחלתך. So this verse says, why, Hashem, are you taking us astray off your path? You've hardened our hearts from receiving your fear. Return to your servants, or return to us for your servants, the tribes of your inheritance. So he explains, Perush, midarchecha. What does it mean that you've caused us through exile to be astray from your paths, from your ways? That's Midat Avraham. That's talking about Abraham. Why? Because it says about Abraham, Aloch v'nasa anegva. He's the one who traveled, right? He traveled through all of Eretz Yisrael. So those are the paths. So we have drawn astray. We've gone astray from Abraham. And mi'iratecha is Yitzchak. And from your fear of God, that's Isaac. Good. Where's Jacob here?
That's what I was about to ask you.
He doesn't say, but he says chulu. So you have to look for Jacob here. Could be that libeinu, right? Our heart. Our heart is usually tiferet.
Mm-hmm.
That's Jacob. And now he says, וקובל הנביא למה תתנו ותקשיח ליבנו ממידת אברהם ויצחק להיות רחוקים מאור פני השם שיתגלה עלינו ולהיות בגלות אדום הם ענייני העולם הזה. So being astray is not exile physically because we're not in the land of Israel. That's not the point that's not the main issue with exile. The main issue is that we're no longer able to base our lives on spiritual matters. But rather, now that we took a walk, all we talked about was physical matters, right? Because that's what everybody talks about. That's what's interesting to everybody. All these physical matters.
Bitcoin.
So that's what it means to be astray. That's what it means to be in exile. That all I'm concerned with all day long is physical matters. And if I set some time apart for Torah, it's nice. I learned during that time. But that's not what concerns me the other 23 hours. The rest of the time, all I'm doing is I'm pursuing my physical needs. I'm pursuing my wealth. I'm pursuing this, pursuing that. And then I lead my life based on physical matters. That's what I'm interested in. And that's what it means to be in exile. Al kol panim, shuv leman avadecha, shivtei by the way, that's called the exile of Edom. That's the exile of Esav. The Greek exile was not like that. Greece was not necessarily about money. But Edom, what?
It was about beauty.
It's about beauty, about philosophy, other things. It was a competing spirituality, but it was more spiritual. But the Romans, there the measure of success was wealth. The measure of success was not knowledge, it wasn't beauty even. It was wealth.
Right. You became the emperor depending on how much you gave.
Right. You bought everything. Al kol panim shuv leman avadecha shivtei nachalatecha. Klomar, in the end, he says in the verse, return for the sake of your servants, the tribes of your inheritance. כלומר, שאם היות שבחינת מעלות ומדרגות האבות עצמם אינו שורר ומתגלה בנפש האדם בגלות. But what do we take away from this? That when in exile, it's hard for us to access the path of Abraham, the fear of Isaac, the mercy or compassion of Jacob. It's very hard for us to lead our lives based on these principles. We can't access them directly. That's what it means to be in exile. אבל על ידי השתלשלות בחינת ומעלת השבטים יוכל להיות גילוי זה בכל נפש מישראל. But when we say Hashem return, we don't say return to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We say return to the tribes. Why the tribes? Because the tribes are the intermediary that allows us to access the love, the fear, and the compassion in our state, in our reality.
Why don't go to them at all?
Because we can't. We can't. Even when we weren't in exile, we couldn't. Again, because we don't have that level of self-nullification. The way it's drawn down into our reality. I said, their reality was that everything in this world is God. That's how they saw. There's nothing in the world that's outside of God. We don't live that way.
Why does Hashem make Neshamas like that?
Because you don't need them. You serve their purposes. Only 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You don't get a copy of it. There's no point. They did what they did. If they will be resurrected, it will still be them. And you'll see a living example of it. But you won't see another person like it. Because there's no point. It was already done. It's a sort of like that when you're born, in one sense, you have a mission to do. But in another sense, you could fulfill any slot that's still open. So if there's a need for someone who will build, be like the Rebbe, will build the world of Jewry after the Holocaust, theoretically, you could be anyone. You could decide to be that person. You need some talents to be able to do it. But the Rebbe caught it. He grabbed the position. Because he had the talents, he had the abilities, and he took the position. Nobody told him, look, there's a slot waiting to be filled here. There's a tafkid. What do you say tafkid?
A job.
Not a job.
Position.
There's a position waiting to be filled. And somebody was going to build the Jewish world again. No, he built the position himself. But in retrospect, when you look back at it, that was something that needed to be done. And he did it. Same with the patriarchs. There needed to be someone who would see God, and see God in everything, and bring it down into our reality. And so for that position, you had to have a certain talent. The talent was called complete self-nullification. That you're entirely 100% a chariot for the divine. So they did that. Once it's been filled, you don't need another one, because that's been done already. Vinay. Okay, so now we're getting to the main thing. מידתו של יעקב אבינו עליו השלום מבחינת הרחמים העליונים. Jacob represents divine compassion. שאפילו על כל עולמות שייך ונופל מבחינת הרחמנות, כמו שנתבהר במקום אחר. That you have compassion over everything, all the worlds, everything that was created. That's divine compassion. That's when you're talking about infinite compassion. When you're talking about finite compassion, so a person has compassion over his children. He has compassion over his grandchildren. But he doesn't have compassion about the guy next door. It's unnatural. He has to build it. But Jacob represents infinite compassion. Infinite compassion means that Tov Hashem lakol v'rachamav al kol maasav. Hashem is good to all, and he has compassion over all his creations. That's the type of compassion that Jacob had. Okay? That was the type of compassion he represented, he symbolized, he brought down into the world. ומדרגות השבטים יוצאי אורך יעקב הם במדרגה שלמטה ממנו. But so you can follow that Jacob had compassion over the negative also, even bad things. But the tribes that came out of him, Yosef, for instance, okay? they thought, the tribes looking at Joseph said, this is another version of Esav. We have another brother here who is just as wicked as Esav. He has the same makings. Why? Because look at him all day long. What does he look at? The mirror. What's he doing? Beautifying himself. What kind of a person is this? What is he interested in spirituality? He wouldn't go out to shepherd with him. And the shepherds were spiritual people. He didn't understand them, and they didn't understand him. But Jacob made him a special coat, saying that what? That I have a special affinity to you, a special connection. That's compassion. And that's what people are trying to teach now in our generation. That if you have a child who's like a black sheep, don't cast him out. Rather have more compassion on him. And by having more compassion, you might bring him back. So that's what Yaakov was trying to do also. But the Shvatim, the tribes, they're at the lower level. So for them, to have compassion means דהיינו לעורר רחמים רבים הניצוץ אלוקות השורה בנפשו. It's to have compassion on the fact that I have a divine spark in me. It's not even compassion about your divine spark. It's about my divine spark. Okay? Mm-hmm. It's interesting. What are we doing? We're teaching compassion, but we're saying, look, the real infinite compassion you can't get. It's too much. But I want you to learn compassion at least by starting with yourself. Look at yourself and see that there's a divine spark in you. And what's going on with this divine spark?
Not too much.
Right? So have compassion on it and start doing something with it. So again, you want to teach the lesson, and you'll teach it in a limited sense, because that's all the person can understand. That's what it means to be in the lower worlds. That your consciousness is too limited to have true compassion over everything. You can't be like Jacob. על ידי התבוננות בגדולת אינסוף ברוך הוא, איך שהוא רם ונישא וכולו כמי כולו חשיב, וביטול כל הנבראים במקורם, וכלם גם נפשו, כשאתה במקור חוצבה, חלק אלוהו ממעל ממש, שאתה בטלה באור אינסוף, ואיך ירדה פלאים מטה מטה, מיגרמה לבירה מקטע. So he's giving over what he gives over many times. How do you awaken this compassion? You have to think about it. Here you have the master of the universe, and he sent a spark of himself into you, and this spark is all holiness and all good and all the good things in the world. And look at to what a low place it's come that it has to deal all day long with my limited interest in myself. So have a little compassion on it. What does it mean to have a little compassion on it? Think about other people as well. Don't deal only with yourself. Don't be preoccupied only with your needs, with who you are and what you'll be and so on. Think about other people. ולפי ריבוי והאריכות ההתבוננות, כך תגדל הרחמנות ביתר שאת. The more you meditate on this, the more you contemplate this, that you have a spark of divinity, and the same divine that keeps everything alive, that puts everything in reality. And you have a spark of that. So you can't go a little beyond just thinking about yourself. You can. Of course you can. So the more you contemplate this, the more Rahmanus you have. The more compassion you have for things in the world, for others. ועל דרך זה נתקן כל סדר התפילה ופסוקי דזמרה, שכמה פסוקים המספרים שבחו של מקום בילוי אחר עילוי, שמזה תגדל הרחמנות, על ירידת הניצוץ ורוקו ואורנסוף ברוך הוא כנ"ל. So that's why when we daven, we start with Psukkah de Zimra, and there we describe how Hashem takes care of the world. Because all of Psukkah de Zimra is basically describing, from nature to people, everything that's going on. And saying, all this Hashem brought into being, and all this Hashem has compassion over, and all this Hashem is providing for at every moment. And the more you think about this and you say, so it's very nice that Hashem is like that. But then you come and you say, but we're like you. When you begin to say Shema in the brachos, you begin to say, and what? And you've given us from yourself, so I should have compassion as well.
Far away, far away.
Why? That's why you have a tzedakah gmach. Why do you have it? To what?
issue of love.
There's again, we said that's why we could not learn from the Avos. You and I, people of our stature, we can't. If we would have met someone like Avram, we would have shrugged it off as not human. Not human. It's not for me. Reb Usher Freund was a little bit like that. You can't say that he was like Avram, but he had some of the same makings, and he had compassion over everyone. So he stressed all the time. He knew that there was some dissonance. The people saw the way that he acted and said to themselves, "I can't act this way. I can't live my life this way, completely forsaking myself for the benefit of others. I can't live that way." So he used to say, to explain this to people, he said, so to bring it closer to them, so that they couldn't get off easy, and just say, "This is not for me." He'd say, from my own nature, my natural state, I wouldn't give anyone half a cent. You don't know how hard I fight to do all the chesed that I do. Even to give somebody half a spoiled tomato, he said, takes me all the strength I have. Here's a person who spent every waking moment taking care of other people. Mamish, you have to read the book. Did you read the book? It's chaval. I mean, you have to see that there was somebody like this in our generation. Somebody who deeply cared about every single human being and didn't just talk to them. He went and did things for them in ways that you can't understand. The famous story that I told you about the jewelry, that he went to buy jewelry because he had a jewelry store. That was his parnasa. And he took a Talmud of his with him. And on the way back, he had a suitcase full of jewelry that he had purchased in the north from different artisans. They stopped in Meron, and he went to daven, and he told the student, "Listen, watch this suitcase really well, because I can sense that there are people here who are not so on the up and up. So watch it carefully. I'm going into daven." He went into daven, and the other guy, he fell asleep, got distracted, whatever. Next time he looks down, the suitcase is gone. Rav Usher came out, and he started running around like a madman, trying to find it. Like, who stole it? Who took it? And there was 100,000 shekels worth of jewels in there, and to buy it, Rav Usher had put another mortgage on his home.
Oh, wow.
So Rav Usher comes out of davening, and he looks at, he sees him running around like a madman. He sees he doesn't have the suitcase. He understood. Why did this story become known? Because the guy who this happened to, he said, Rav Usher didn't say a word. He only asked him, like naturally, "Did you eat yet today?" He said he didn't understand what he was saying to him. He was going mad trying to find the suitcase. "What are you talking about? Food?" Rav Usher says again, "Did you eat today? Did you drink today?" He said, "No." "Okay, let's sit down here and eat." So he bought them sandwiches, and they sat down and ate, and they went back to Yerushalayim. That was it. He never said a word about it. Can you imagine somebody just losing?
You never found it?
It was never found. But this is just one story. That was the story that made him famous, because this guy publicized his story. But there were hundreds of stories like this. And every single waking moment that that's Avraham. So you and I, when we look at that, we say, that's not human. You can't be that way. There's no way you can be that way. Yeah. So we can't receive directly from Avraham. We'll just shrug it off and say, not for us. So you have a little gemach, and you say, you shrug that off also, and you say, I only do it the Maritain, I only do it so people will respect me, I only do this, I only do that. So that's how our world works. What can you do? You can try to fight it, but you'll get nowhere, because in our world, the consciousness that you and I have, the most important thing is us. So we deal with ourselves most of the day, and dealing with others, helping others is an afterthought. If we have time in the evening, if we're not tired, if this, if that, said we'll do something. Yeah? And that's okay. That's what he's trying to say. You don't try to build an ideal that cannot be accessed by most of the population. That's what he's saying. You need the tribes. The tribes are showing you a smaller ideal, one that you can relate to. And the moment that you can relate in that way, then your soul can also pick up something from the traits of the patriarchs. It goes through this filter of the tribes, and it makes it into a real world concept. And the benefit here is that it's enough for you to do something small, some small awakening from below to have compassion, for instance. And because it's called a shevet, and we said the shevet is like a branch. So the branch, especially when you're talking about something like a brosh, v'ani ki brosh ra'anan. We talked about this once. The brosh is one of these ferns that they're so flexible that you can take the top and you can pull it all the way down to the ground. And when you do that, he says, that's what it means, that you awaken from below, but the moment that you let go, it affects above. So it's like by there being tribes who are these branches that came down from the tree all the way down to where we are. So when we do something down here, we're actually affecting the tree on the top, because the branch that we're seeing is not the bottom, it's actually the top that was drawn down to the bottom. Okay? So this is like someone who, today it's very easy to understand this, it used to be very hard. But on my phone, right, I have one of these branches. I have a bank, right, and I have my money in a bank. But on my phone, I have a branch of the bank. That's why there's no more physical branches, because who needs a physical branch when your phone can do everything? So your phone is like the top of the tree, drawn down into your hand. And then you do something here, and up, on top, in the bank itself, you move the money from here to there. Okay? That's the same idea. It's the same idea. So a tribe.
Really moving it instead of your question where it's written down. It's not, the money hasn't moved.
Right. So the same thing.
Not even in the bank.
The same thing by Hashem. Even if you did something here below, but it was because of the tribe, because of the influence of the tribe, the influence of these conduits, these intermediaries, it really registers above. It really happens above. Whatever happens, it happens above. And like you say, nothing really happens, but again, that's because Hashem does everything anyway.
Right.
It's a different type of it doesn't happen. But it affects above. It has the same effect above. So it says all this is why you needed the tribes. Okay? So all this is very important. Why is this important? Because we're setting up to understand why Lavan had to kiss the children of Jacob. Because Lavan, as we'll see tomorrow, he represents the infinite. Right? He's Lavan Ailyon, the supernal white. Lavan means white. So he's the supernal whiteness. And the fact that he was a bad guy in the supernal realm of the infinite doesn't mean anything. Because before the infinite, like we said, it's infinite. It's infinite. There's no differences. And so suddenly Lavan can become revealed as a kindly grandfather who comes and kisses his grandchildren. What happened? You didn't want to kill them 2 minutes ago? Above, we'll discuss this tomorrow. Above, it doesn't work that way. Above, rachamav al kol ma'asav. He has compassion on everyone. But it's very important that once in their lifetime they received a kiss from the infinite, directly, not through the patriarchs, meaning not through Jacob. And we'll see why that is. So,
Yeah.